I only stay because of you, said Martin from Avalon Solutions, right after his third whiskey. He was crying again. This time it was because their CEO had botched another product rollout and Kathleen, me, had spent the last 72 hours babysitting the account so it didn't implode into a flaming ball of legal threats and LinkedIn scandals. I nodded, patted his back, and slid the contract renewal across the table. He signed it with a thumbprint and a half-eaten mozzarella stick. That was a Tuesday. See, when you're the one who remembers their kid's birthday, their wife's cancer remission date, and the name of their bulldog, Waffles, bless him, you get a little more than performance reviews and Slack emojis. You get trust. Sticky, ugly, deep in the trenches trust. The kind of trust that makes a grown man text you PLS help at 1:13 a.m. on a Sunday from a Marriott lobby after a demo goes to hell and his boss is threatening to fly in. And I always helped. I was the person they called when the tech failed, the project manager ghosted, or the CEO promised the moon and delivered a beige PowerPoint. Didn't matter if it was midnight or Christmas Eve, I'd take the call. I didn't log the hours, didn't ask for applause. Because in the world of enterprise software, keeping a client is worth more than any damn bonus. The new leadership didn't get that. They thought client bonding meant posting holiday greetings on LinkedIn. They thought relationships were bullet points on a CRM entry. I was something they couldn't measure, so they started squinting at me like I was a problem. Not that I cared, not yet, but let me rewind. 8 years. That's how long I worked at Kessler Dynamics. Started as an account coordinator. Became senior client executive after saving a $45 contract in my second year by flying to Phoenix on my own dime and babysitting a data center upgrade that had gone so sideways it made the Challenger explosion look like a fire drill. I earned my place. Not through politics, through presence. But something changed about a year ago. The old VP retired, burnt out, or bought out, I never knew. The new one, Brent, fresh from a private equity portfolio company and dressed like he was auditioning for an HBO series about failed startups. Brent loved metrics, dashboards, hierarchies, but mostly Brent loved Brent. He called me Kath, I corrected him. He said it was friendly. I said it was condescending. HR called me in for tone. Brent's first big idea, decentralized client engagement, which was code for let junior reps handle calls so Brent could brag about scaling human capital in his quarterly reports. I watched account health plummet like a skydiver without a chute. Clients started pinging me directly, begging for clarity. I gave it to them quietly. I was still the fixer, just less visible, but that's when the paranoia started. I saw it in the eyes of middle managers. The long pauses during Zoom calls, the just checking in emails from HR that smelled like vanilla compliance and death threats. I wasn't stupid. I knew I was too senior, too seasoned, too indispensable to be allowed to exist in Brent's shiny new org chart. I was a threat, and threats get neutralized. That's when I started to listen, really listen, and document. Every whispered we're only here because of you, every client who offered me other opportunities, every dinner where someone vented about how Kessler was getting too big, too impersonal, too slow. I didn't initiate any of it, I just didn't shut it down, but back then, I still believed in loyalty. I still thought, maybe if I just ride this wave, things will stabilize. Maybe Brent will burn out on his own hot air and move on. Maybe the board will wise up. Spoiler, they didn't. Now, if you've made it this far and you're thinking, damn, I've seen this movie before. You probably have. It's playing out in offices across the country like some corporate Groundhog Day. And yeah, 95% of you are probably listening without subscribing, which is a little like showing up to your friend's BBQ, eating 2 burgers, and ghosting before cleanup. So smash that subscribe button, toss us a like, and support the team that brings you the fire before HR finds out we still have opinions. Back to Kathleen. There's this weird thing that happens when clients start seeing you as the company. You stop working for the logo and start working for the relationship. Not in some kumbaya, people first kind of way. I mean real loyalty. Blood in the contract kind of loyalty. And over the next few months, I'd find out just how deep that loyalty went. Because while Brent was busy trying to replace me with a pie chart, my clients were quietly preparing for war. They just needed me to give the signal. I hadn't planned to fire first. But damn, I was ready to finish it. It started with a calendar invite. Title, alignment check-in. No context, no agenda, just that. Brent's assistant, who called herself a visibility specialist, whatever the hell that meant, booked it for 7:45 a.m. on a Thursday, the most passive-aggressive time slot known to man. When I walked in, Brent was already seated at the long end of the conference table, holding a cold brew like it was a damn chalice. HR was there too, Natalie, the one who always smiled like she'd just euthanized a puppy but was proud of how kindly she did it. Brent opened with a PowerPoint. Of course he did. Slide 1. A Venn diagram labeled client ownership and scalable interfaces. Slide 2. A photo of me cropped from our own website under the heading Risk of Dependency. See, Kathleen, Brent said, fake concern smeared all over his face. We've identified that your relationships with key accounts have blurred some lines. You're spending a disproportionate amount of time on direct engagement. That's not scalable. I leaned back, arms crossed, define disproportionate. Natalie clicked to the next slide. A bar graph. According to time logs, your call hours exceed the average by 240%. You've expensed more client dinners than the entire Midwest team combined. And this is important, you've been bypassing assigned account managers. I looked Brent in the eye, because the account managers you hired couldn't locate their own ass with both hands and a GPS. One client called me crying because a rep told them patches are optional. Brent didn't blink. That's exactly what I mean. Undermining the team, acting as a lone operator. This isn't about heroics. It's about boundaries. I bit my cheek to stop the laugh. Boundaries from the guy who posted gym selfies during board meetings. HR's recommendation, I take a strategic step back. Let junior reps grow into the role. Focus on internal enablement. In other words, shut up, sit down, and be less useful. They didn't fire me. They declawed me. I walked out of that meeting feeling like a guard dog put on a vegan diet. My badge still worked. My title hadn't changed, but my leash had just gotten tighter. And the monitoring? Oh, it escalated fast. My calendar started filling with ride-along invites from Brent's Golden Boys, guys who couldn't spell middleware, let alone negotiate a six-figure SLA breach. My expense reports got flagged. A client dinner I'd attended annually for 6 years was suddenly deemed non-essential spend. Natalie asked if I could start submitting daily summaries of my calls to ensure alignment with org goals. It was like being audited by toddlers. And then came the whispers. People stopped seeing me. Slack channels I'd created were archived without notice. A peer, one I'd mentored since she started, warned me after hours. Brent's talking about succession planning. For your role? Succession planning. I wasn't dying. I wasn't retiring. I was being surgically removed while still walking. But it wasn't just the company shifting. My clients felt it too. Jason from Elora Tech called me after noticing a green as grass associate had shown up to their quarterly review in my place. Kathleen, I'm not trying to be dramatic, but if you're not involved, we're not renewing. Just being honest. And then came the moment I knew. It was a casual lunch. Kelly from Trivento Systems. We were halfway through our salads when she said, if you ever left Kessler, we'd follow. No hesitation, I played it off. Laughed, don't tempt me, she didn't laugh back. I'm serious, you're not an employee, you're our firewall. If you go, I'm pulling the plug. I smiled, but inside, something cracked open. That night, I poured a glass of wine, opened a blank folder on my desktop, and named it Contingency Prep. I didn't know exactly what I was preparing for. Not yet, but I knew the air had shifted. The tone in meetings, the glances from HR, the way Brent stopped calling me Kath and started saying legacy resource. I'd become a relic, a risk, and risks in companies like ours get repackaged into severance packages. So I began to document every policy shift, every client complaint forwarded to me after being misrouted to a junior, every time I was asked to step back while being privately begged to step in. Because when the knives came, and they would, I wasn't going to bleed quietly. I was going to hand them a file so thick it gave their lawyers carpal tunnel. And somewhere deep in my gut, I started to wonder, what if I stopped being the one who saved the deals and became the reason they collapsed? What if I wasn't the safety net? What if I was the trapdoor? The first person I called wasn't a recruiter or my therapist or even my husband. It was my cousin Lara, who just so happens to be the scariest contract lawyer on the Eastern Seaboard. Picture a woman who files prenups for billionaires before brunch, shreds NDAs for fun, and once made a hedge fund CEO cry by quoting his own bylaws back to him in a deposition. I hadn't seen her in years, but after that lunch with Kelly from Trivento and a Friday afternoon performance growth reflection email from HR, I picked up the phone. She answered on the second ring. Kathleen, you only call when you're either planning a murder or trying not to commit one. Option 3, I said. I want to prepare for a corporate decapitation. Slow, legal, surgical, Lara's voice purred. Finally, we met the next morning at a tiny cafe she liked because no one here knows how to sue each other. I laid it all out, Brent, HR, the passive-aggressive purgatory they were engineering around me, and the off-the-record comments from clients hinting they'd walk if I left. She listened, then smiled like a cat who'd just spotted a drunk mouse on rollerblades. You're sitting on a gold mine, Kath, she said. You don't need revenge, you need leverage. Ever heard of a client retention rider? I hadn't, not like she meant it. Here's the gist. It's a clause buried deep in the contract or signed as an independent addendum that gives the client an out if a named individual is removed, reassigned, or terminated. Not illegal, not even unusual, but rare, because most companies assume they own the relationship. What Lara and I knew, I was the relationship, and the clients knew it too. Within a week, she drew up a flexible template. Clean, airtight, legal poetry. The wording was elegant, but the meaning was blunt. In the event that Kathleen Doyle is no longer directly engaged in the service of this account, the client reserves the right to initiate immediate contract reevaluation or termination without penalty. No poison, no theatrics, just facts. The first person I floated it to was Jason from Elora Tech. We were on a video call going over their renewal roadmap when I said, hypothetically, if I left Kessler, do you want a built-in clause allowing you to revisit your contract? He didn't even blink. Can we do that? I have a lawyer, I said. We can send it. And just like that, the first domino fell. Over the next 6 weeks, I moved quietly. I didn't approach legal. I didn't use company systems. Lara handled it all externally. Each agreement was customized, signed off independently, and mirrored to personal backups. They weren't breach threats. They were contingency options. Safety nets for the people who trusted me. By week 4, I had 8 signed. By week 6, I had 15, including some of the most high-profile, high-dollar clients on our books. What shocked me wasn't how quickly they agreed. It was how eager they were. You've saved our asses more than once, said Priya from OneSpan Systems. If they push you out, it's proof they're not serious about our success. I'd follow you anywhere, said Marty from Veridan. Just say the word. They weren't loyal to Kessler. They were loyal to me. And that's when it hit me hard and clean. My employer didn't own me anymore. Not in spirit, not in leverage, not in trust. They were coasting on a reputation I'd built. While Brent played dress-up CEO and HR played compliance theater, I had been laying foundation after foundation in the real world, the one that mattered. It was the realization that broke something inside me. Loyalty should go both ways, but it never had. I'd spent years cleaning up their messes, smoothing over arrogance, translating ego into solutions, protecting execs from accountability. And now, the moment I became inconvenient, they tried to fade me out like a Windows update. No confrontation, just polite suffocation. Well, they weren't the only ones allowed to prepare. By the end of the second month, Lara had locked in over 20 customized retention clauses, all silent, all legal, all sitting like dormant landmines under the floorboards of Kessler's Q4 revenue projections. And I was done being the safety net. From now on, I'd be the tripwire. The moment they pulled the wrong move, they'd find out just how many strings I wasn't holding anymore, because I'd handed them to someone else. That night, I poured myself a glass of Pinot Noir, sat out on the back deck, and opened a fresh notebook. Page 1, Exit Strategy, Client-Driven. And under it, a single sentence I circled 3 times. No more saving people who don't care if I drown. The invite hit my inbox at 4:02 p.m. on a Monday, right as I was finishing a call with a client who just had their 4th product failure in 6 weeks. The subject line? Behavioral Alignment Review. Kind of corporate word salad that makes your skin crawl before you even open the damn email. It was from Natalie, of course. Our HR shepherd in beige cardigans, who always looked like she'd been cry-cry meditating in the car. The body of the email was full of cheerful weaponry. We'd love to offer you a safe space to explore opportunities for growth within evolving role expectations. Translation. Bring your badge and a smile, we're coming for your spine. The meeting room was already too warm when I walked in. They always crank the heat when they want you to sweat. Brent was there, greased hair, fake laugh, tapping a Montblanc pen like he was about to underwrite an exorcism. Natalie sat beside him, tablet in hand, sympathy preloaded in her face like it was part of her outfit. Thanks for coming, Kathleen, she started, tone soft like I was a lost puppy instead of a wolf in their office lobby. Just wanted to check in on some patterns. Brent jumped in. There's been concern about blurred professional lines. I tilted my head. Blurred how? Natalie tapped her screen. Overengagement, high volumes of off-hours communication, clients expressing personal attachment. One even referred to you as indispensable in an email to procurement. I snorted. How dare they? Brent didn't laugh. We want to avoid dependency. I smiled. Isn't that the point of retention? He blinked. We're trying to build systems, not saints. Natalie leaned in. We've noticed that your involvement sometimes leads to confusion about who's leading the account. Oh, I'm fully aware who's leading it, I said. It's just not the person you think. Pause. Brent cleared his throat, clearly unamused. We're asking that you pull back. Let the assigned team handle their responsibilities. No more solo outreach. No more private dinners. No more unsanctioned communication outside of business hours. Of course, I said, nodding like a bobblehead in church. You're absolutely right. I should be more careful. Brent smiled like he'd just neutered a threat. What he didn't see, what he never saw, was the flicker behind my eyes. The part of me that was already noting which 3 clients I'd be calling tonight. Because if they wanted to pretend I was some clingy relic hanging on to the old way of doing things, fine. I'd play the fossil, but I'd do it with fangs. Back at my desk, I opened my secure laptop, the one I never connected to the company VPN, updated the spreadsheet. 3 new files, 3 new contracts, all phrased a little differently. One cited dependency risk mitigation. Another used confidence anchor. All of them said the same thing. If Kathleen Doyle disappears, we renegotiate. By Thursday, they were signed. Jason from Elora Tech even added a personal note. Frankly, we trust you more than we trust their software. By Friday, I had 2 more pending. My little folder, once a whisper of rebellion, was now a full-blown arsenal. 23 clients, 23 loaded chambers. And still, I smiled through the meetings. I nodded during change management calls. I left fake reactions on Slack posts about Brent's latest vision sprint. Let them think I was playing ball. Because while they spent their energy sanitizing my calendar and removing me from client-facing threads, I was engineering something none of them understood. Quiet loyalty. Earned loyalty. Loyalty you can't reassign to a new account manager with a half smile and a Salesforce login. What they never got, what no MBA ever teaches, is that people don't stay for products. They stay for people who give a damn, and I gave a damn. Right up until they made that a problem. That week I started printing hard copies of the signed clauses. Not for use, just insurance. Tucked into a locked drawer in my home office, each signature felt like a poker chip in a game they didn't know they were losing. I could feel the threshold under my feet, that invisible line you cross where there's no going back, not emotionally, not politically, not professionally. I wasn't just prepping anymore, I was waiting. And the waiting, it wasn't passive, it was precise. Every forced smile, every compliance meeting, every passive-aggressive calendar audit they threw my way, I absorbed it like fuel. Because when the moment came, and it would come, I wasn't going to fight back. I was going to walk out with a smile so calm they wouldn't realize the building was burning until the sprinklers kicked in. And I wouldn't even be there to watch. The warning came from Claudia, the only person left on my floor who still looked me in the eye when we passed in the hall. She wasn't even supposed to be in that meeting. Some internal talent recalibration nonsense Brent was spearheading, where he gathered department heads to evaluate legacy value alignment. Translation: figure out which veterans still had a pulse and which ones could be replaced by shiny new yes men with white teeth and LinkedIn certificates. She pulled me aside after lunch, voice low, eyes scanning the hallway like we were in a Cold War thriller. Look, I shouldn't say this, but Brent's gunning for your role, she said you're outdated, that you don't scale, that you're too emotionally entangled with the client base. I blinked. Emotionally entangled? She nodded. His words, not mine. He's positioning you as a bottleneck. Says client loyalty to a person is a liability, not an asset. That was rich, coming from a man whose loyalty was entirely to his mirror. I thanked her, kept my face neutral, and walked back to my desk like nothing happened. But something inside me snapped, not loud, not dramatic, more like the last notch in a belt giving way after months of strain. I sat down, opened my contingency folder, and stared at the list. 23 signed, 2 pending. By the end of the day, it would be 25. At 4:12 p.m., an email landed in my encrypted inbox. Subject line, per your suggestion, was from Priya, the senior VP over at OneSpan Systems. She'd always been sharp, calm, tactical. The kind of executive who never needed to raise her voice because her silence did the cutting for her. Inside the email was a draft letter, already printed on OneSpan letterhead. It read, effective immediately, we are invoking Clause 4B of the retention agreement, pending reevaluation of services following the departure of Kathleen Doyle from our engagement team. Please consider all deliverables and milestones suspended until further discussion. The closing line, our partnership has always been based on trust. That trust has a name. There was no body text, no greeting, just the document ready to fire. Underneath, Priya had written, say when. I leaned back in my chair, hand over my mouth, not from shock, from confirmation. All the months of wondering if I was crazy, if I was overplaying my hand, if the relationships I built were just sugar and small talk, they weren't. They were real. And now they were weapons. But not everyone saw it that way. The silence inside Kessler had become suffocating. People stopped asking me to join meetings. Internal threads I used to lead were now mysteriously archived. Junior reps I trained were suddenly looping in Brent for strategic context. HR started including vague reminders in their emails about maintaining team unity and communication channels. I'd become radioactive. I wasn't just being pushed out, I was being erased. Slowly, quietly, efficiently, it was death by erasure. The kind of internal purge that doesn't leave fingerprints, just a shrinking chair, a cold desk, and an inbox that stops pinging. But outside the walls, I'd never been louder. Clients called me directly through personal numbers. Texts rolled in, are you okay? We heard something weird from the new AE, want to confirm with you. Brent's guy said you were stepping back, that true? I told them all the same thing, let's stay connected, just in case. I started to see myself differently, not as an employee, not even as a leader. I was an ecosystem, living infrastructure that had built itself around relationships no quarterly forecast could replicate. I wasn't a line item on a payroll spreadsheet, I was the bridge holding 2 continents together. If they burned me, they'd drown in the river I held back. One night, after an especially surreal team meeting where Brent announced a client intimacy reboot without so much as blinking at me, I went home, poured myself a whiskey, and pulled up the full list. 25 accounts, all willing to walk, collectively, $340 million in recurring contracts, just shy of half the company's annual revenue. I was no longer wondering if I could bring the house down. I was now wondering when to light the match. And for the first time in months, I slept like a baby. It happened on a Tuesday. Tuesdays are always the days they do it, far enough from the weekend to avoid gossip, close enough to Friday that people forget by happy hour. HR likes patterns. Patterns feel safe, predictable, civilized, but nothing about what went down that day was civilized. I was halfway through drafting a Q3 renewal strategy for a client who hadn't had a working server in 9 days when my Slack lit up. Natalie from HR, hi Kathleen. Can you come by for a quick sync in conference room D? The exclamation point was a nice touch, like a serial killer offering you cookies before the axe. I didn't respond. I didn't need to, I already knew. I shut my laptop, grabbed my phone, left my mug on the desk. Didn't even bother to close my browser tabs. When I stepped into conference room D, it was already staged like a bad cop procedural. Natalie sat on one side of the table, tablet out, expression carefully blank. Brent was in the corner, arms crossed, leaning like he thought he was the boss in a startup biopic. The blinds were drawn. The door clicked shut behind me like a punctuation mark. Thanks for coming, Natalie began. Her tone was so gentle I almost burst out laughing, like she was here to break up with me after a 2-week relationship. Brent stayed quiet, watching, feeding. She continued, "We're here today to inform you that, effective immediately, your employment with Kessler Dynamics is being terminated." No preamble, no build-up, just the guillotine. I stayed standing. No reason to sit through the funeral. Natalie glanced at her tablet. The decision was made following multiple policy violations, including misappropriation of time, unapproved client communications, and failure to adhere to internal engagement protocols. I raised an eyebrow. You practicing that in the mirror, or did Brent write it for you? Brent smirked. You're not bigger than the company, Kathleen. I finally smiled, slow, controlled, the kind of smile that makes people nervous even if they don't know why. Oh, I know, I said, but the relationships I built are. Natalie slid the papers across the table like she was serving dessert. Here's your final paperwork. Severance, transition terms, NDA. She kept talking, but I stopped listening. My eyes were on Brent, who looked like a kid who just keyed a car and thought he got away with it. The man had no idea the vehicle was wired to a C4 charge. Before you ask, Natalie added, you're not required to sign anything now. You can review and return these within 7 business days. I picked up the envelope, tapped it against my palm, then set it down. Strongest relationships I've ever built, I said, and you just handed them back to me. Brent's face twitched. Barely. But I saw it. That's when I reached for my badge. I didn't throw it, didn't slam it. Just slid it across the table like a poker chip I no longer needed. The room was silent, tight, humming with the kind of tension you only get when someone realizes they're not holding the cards anymore. And that was it. No scene, no shouting, no begging for references or LinkedIn endorsements. I left the room, past 3 coworkers in the hallway, none of whom made eye contact, and walked out the glass front doors of a company I'd carried for 8 goddamn years. The sun was too bright, the air too crisp. Everything felt wrong, like stepping into a movie where the main character dies in Act 2 and no one's told the director yet. I got in my car, closed the door, sat still. No tears, no rage, just breathe. Then I pulled out my personal phone, the one they never knew I used for client calls, and opened Signal. There were already 3 messages waiting. We heard, we're ready, want us to trigger the clause, say when. I typed back one line, wait for my lawyer, because this wasn't the end. It was the fuse. That night, the sky over my neighborhood was a deep, syrupy blue, one of those early autumn evenings where the chill creeps in through the windows like a rumor. I sat on my porch, blanket over my lap, glass of Malbec in hand, watching the streetlights flicker on like dominoes falling into darkness. My laptop sat open beside me. Secure connection, burner Wi-Fi, nothing traceable. At 7:11 p.m., the first email went out. Subject, contract reevaluation per retention clause, immediate attention required. It came from Elora Tech's legal team. Polite, firm, deadly. Per our executed rider dated March 12, 2025, you're formally initiating a review of all current service deliverables, contracts, and milestones. Our terms with Kessler Dynamics were contingent upon direct engagement with Kathleen Doyle. In her absence, we are exercising our right to suspend obligations pending renegotiation. That first one was like the opening notes of a funeral dirge. At 7:18 p.m., the next hit, OneSpan Systems, then Trivento, then Veridin, then Biomatrix. By 8 p.m., my secure inbox was flooded. Legal reps, procurement leads, CTO, and CIOs, people who hadn't emailed in months, were now rolling their grenades across the conference room floors of Kessler Dynamics. Every subject line had a similar ring. Per Clause 4B triggering contingency rider, immediate suspension of deliverables. Notification of terms reevaluation following personnel change. Every one of them legally binding. Every one of them engineered by me, months ago in the quiet. Inside of 90 minutes, $340 million in contracts, nearly half the company's booked revenue, was now listed as pending, paused, or under renegotiation. That's the thing about trust. It doesn't show up on a balance sheet until it walks out the door and takes the damn building with it. At 8:46 p.m., my personal phone buzzed. Unknown number. Brent. I let it ring. Watched it vibrate across the patio table like a dying fish. Voicemail, then another. Then a text, we need to talk, please. I sipped my wine and tapped the screen, do not disturb, because no, Brent, we don't need to talk. You already did all the talking at town halls and passive-aggressive email threads during backdoor meetings with HR while pretending to empower legacy leaders. You gave the speech. You wrote the check. Now you get to cash it. At 9:03 p.m., lawyer Lara texted me a screenshot. It was an internal thread from OneSpan's legal department, CC'd to Kessler's general counsel. Just to clarify, our continued business with Kessler was predicated on Kathleen Doyle's leadership. Her removal constitutes a material change in the service relationship. We are not obligated to continue under the present terms. Mike dropped. By 10 p.m., Brent had tried calling me 4 more times. Natalie once. Even Claudia, bless her, sent a message, "Are you okay?" Shit's hitting the fan. I didn't respond, not because I was being cold, but because there was nothing left to say. This was never personal for me. It was surgical, measured, prepped with the same precision I used to plan global client deployments. Except this time, the rollout wasn't software, it was justice. I closed the laptop, looked up at the sky. The stars were showing now, shy, scattered, like they'd heard the noise and wanted to see who won. Inside, I could hear the ding of another email landing. Probably another client pulling the pin. The machine that was Kessler Dynamics, so smug in its metrics and dashboards, had been gutted by the one thing it couldn't quantify: human loyalty. They thought they could strip it away, bury it under org charts and empty vision statements. But loyalty, true loyalty, it doesn't vanish, it waits. And tonight it answered, loudly, legally, without raising its voice. Wednesday morning, 7:02 a.m., the boardroom at Kessler Dynamics was already humming with the panic of men in $1,000 suits realizing their kingdom was built on sand, and the tide had just come in. The emergency meeting had been called at midnight. No agenda. Just one line from the CEO, all board members and executive leadership, mandatory attendance. Situation: client retention crisis. The phrase client retention might sound dull on paper, but when $340 million evaporates overnight, it becomes the stuff of heart attacks. The CEO, Grayson Dell, the kind of man who'd once told me perception is delivery, was pale and furious. Not the righteous, slamming fist kind of fury. No, this was the quiet, internal hemorrhaging of a man whose quarterly bonus had just vanished in a puff of NDAs and legalese. He stood at the head of the table, arms crossed, jaw clenched so tight you could hear the molars grind. "Someone explain," he said, voice low and cold, "how nearly half our booked revenue is now legally suspended due to one employee's departure." Silence. Then legal Miriam, poor thing, barely 3 months into her role, cleared her throat. She had a manila folder trembling in her hands, which was never a good sign in a room full of corporate lifers. These clauses were lawful, she said. Each was client-signed. Clean, no breach of employment terms. She didn't leverage internal IP. She used her own communications channels, nothing traceable to company systems. Grayson blinked. "So you're telling me she legally walked out of here and took our clients with her?" Brent, seated 2 seats down, tried to rally. She didn't notify leadership. This was malicious. She operated in bad faith. That's when the CFO, Martha, who hadn't spoken yet, looked up from her laptop, pushed her glasses up, and said flatly she didn't have to. All heads turned. Grayson narrowed his eyes. "Explain." Martha didn't flinch. "The clients signed retention riders. They're legal instruments, not sabotage, not breach. Just smart risk management from their side. Kathleen gave them a lifeline, and now they're using it." Brent's face drained of color. "But she wasn't authorized to negotiate." "She didn't negotiate," Martha snapped. "She didn't promise discounts. She didn't use proprietary documentation. She built trust. That's not illegal, Brent. That's just rare." The room went still. Miriam tried to offer something, anything. "We could try to argue undue influence or breach of loyalty, but there's no evidence." In fact, several clients noted in writing that they approached her first. Grayson's mouth was a thin line. "So our clients willingly built these clauses with her." Miriam nodded. He turned to Brent. "And your plan for account scalability was to fire the one person holding the accounts together." Brent opened his mouth, closed it. Then Martha added with surgical precision, "Also worth noting, half the accounts impacted were on the priority renewal list Brent submitted 2 weeks ago, the ones he bragged about personally locking down." Grayson's head turned slowly. "I to the board." Brent stammered, I didn't know she had these riders. She blindsided us." "She didn't blindside us," Martha said. "She insulated herself. And our clients followed. Because she's the only one they trusted. That's not sabotage, that's gravity." Silence again. Until one of the outside board members, an older man with more gray hair than remaining optimism, muttered, "Why didn't we know?" HR's director, Natalie, finally spoke, voice trembling slightly. "There were concerns about her boundaries with clients. We tried to realign her to non-client-facing tasks. We followed protocol." Grayson turned toward her slowly, deliberately. "Your protocol just detonated our Q3. You buried our most valuable asset under performance reviews and alignment syncs while she was holding the goddamn company together with duct tape and goodwill." Natalie's face fell. Her tablet dimmed in her lap. "Effective immediately." Grayson said, "HR oversight is suspended. Your role is under review." She didn't respond, just gathered her things in silence. As for Brent, when Grayson turned toward him next, there was no speech. No dramatic firing, just a sentence. "Get out of my org chart," and that was it. By noon, Brent's email was deactivated. His name vanished from the leadership page. Internal Slack channels buzzed with whispers and guesses, but nobody said it out loud, because everyone already knew. By 3 p.m., legal was on the phone with outside counsel trying to understand how many contracts could be salvaged, renegotiated, or clawed back. By 4 p.m., the stock price dipped 4 points in after-hours trading after a curious number of enterprise customers were suddenly reviewing vendor alignment. And by 5 p.m., no one had heard from Kathleen Doyle, and no one knew what she was doing next. But everyone, knew she was winning. The morning was still, not metaphorically, I mean still. Like the universe had decided to hold its breath just for me. I sat on my back patio in a pair of sweatpants older than most interns, bare feet on cool concrete, steam curling off the top of my coffee mug like a victory dance no one could choreograph. Birds chirped like idiots. A neighbor's sprinkler hissed to life. Somewhere down the block, a garbage truck groaned and clattered. And me. I hadn't slept that well in a decade. The doorbell rang at 8:17 a.m. Sharp, professional, not a friend, not a neighbor, that was a courier knock. I opened the door to find a suited man holding a white envelope and a digital tablet. Miss Doyle, I nodded. Delivery from Kessler Dynamics requires signature. I didn't ask what was inside, didn't need to. I scrawled my name, took the envelope, and let the door click shut behind me. Back on the patio, opened it with one hand and sipped with the other. Inside, a cashier's check for the full severance amount, a standard NDA I would not be signing, a letter that began with "We appreciate your service" and ended with "We wish you all the best in your future endeavors." I laughed, out loud. The letter fluttered in my hand, weak and unknowing. They still thought they were sending me off with a pat on the head and a check to hush the storm. But the storm already had a name. My phone buzzed. Secure line. "Lara, you sitting down?" she said, voice too casual to be just casual. "Hit me." She forwarded the email. Subject: Joint Statement Vendor Realignment effective immediately from 5 of the top accounts in Kessler's book of business. Elora Tech, OneSpan, Trivento, Veridin, Biomatrix. The body was short, unapologetic. In light of recent structural changes at Kessler Dynamics, we have jointly decided to discontinue services under our current contracts. Effective immediately, we will be transitioning our needs to an independent consultancy led by Kathleen Doyle. Our trust was with her. It remains with her. Below that, 5 digital signatures, 5 accounts, $340 million, gone with me. Another text from Lara followed immediately. "You're now officially CEO of an LLC. I filed it this morning. Bank accounts are live. Welcome to your boutique." I blinked, smiled. No launch party, no startup pitch, no glossy landing page. Just 5 heavy-hitting clients already onboarded. Just trust weaponized, loyalty monetized, freedom notarized. I leaned back in my chair, sun warming my face, and watched the neighborhood go about its sleepy little business while Kessler's headquarters was no doubt on fire in 10 different Slack threads. They thought I'd be a footnote. They didn't realize I was the fine print, because people forget contracts expire. Software ages, PowerPoint fades, but trust is renewable, and mine just got a 10-year extension with equity. I picked up my phone one last time and opened the group thread Lara created. 5 client execs, 1 lawyer and me. I dropped in a screenshot of my new email footer. Simple. Clean. Kathleen Doyle, Principal Consultant, Doyle Strategic Partnerships. LLC trust is an asset, and mine just matured. Then I closed my laptop, finished my coffee, and let the world spin, without me chasing it anymore. Big thanks for watching, you sneaky seniors. Subscribe to keep the coffee pot brewing revenge. Your ex-colleagues won't know what hit 'em.